Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey of Lean Frontiers, and I'll serve as your host today. I'm excited to bring to you today a short webinar on what sales teaches the Lean enterprise, facilitated by one of North America's most experienced facilitators, Joe Dager. So for now, let me turn things over to Joe.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Dager, as Jacqueline said, of Business 901. And I'd like to thank Lean Frontiers for the opportunity to present to everyone today. The webinar is muted, but I will offer anyone the opportunity here to connect to me on LinkedIn or through my website. You just mention Lean Frontiers, and I'll send you a complimentary ebook on marketing with PDCA. There are a lot of people out there, including many listeners, that are more astute about Lean than me. Others may be pretty good at sales and marketing. What makes, I think, me somewhat different is there are very few of us in the field of lean marketing. Just not a lot of people on that bridge. So depending on who I talk to, I get to be pretty smart either in lean or I get to be pretty smart in sales. Just depends what side of the fence I'm on. And presenting on this subject for over a half dozen years now, in those audience, very seldom do I find a lot of marketing folks and seldom, if any, salespeople. And because of that, I wonder, have we ever taken the time to identify the real value that Lean would provide to those sales and marketing people? If I thought there were sales and marketing people out there, I'd go through the 5 core concepts, specify value and identify all the steps and make value creating steps, and as flow is introduced, let customers pull value and seek perfection. And then I would explain that these are really the key principles in understanding Lean. I would then add that in recent years, there have been a rise of popularity in Toyota Kata, as demonstrated in this slide by Mike Rother. Using the improvement and the coaching Kata gives us a forum for continuous improvement to overcome the resistance to change and to develop deliberate practice in the discipline of Lean, and maybe even sales. Most of you already know all this, and I'm probably just preaching to the choir. But how many people think their sales and marketing people could repeat or know what I just said in the last 2 slides? Take a minute now before we go further to write down a vision for developing Lean in your sales and marketing. Go through this little exercise. Maybe you already have one. But without too much thought, write down a target condition that might occur in trying to reach that vision. And then an obstacle that might occur. And if you could think about it, write down what your next step would be. And what would you expect out of it? I like to do this because I want you to frame the conversation on how you think you should be approaching Lean in sales and marketing, and if you're a sales and marketer, of how Lean could apply to you and what benefits you could get from it. And then the next couple of slides, I'm just going to go briefly into how I perceive Lean a little bit. We'll add some context later to how I think, and for those sales and marketing folk, just a little background. In most Lean thinking, we talk about Kaizen or continuous improvement, which is exemplified in PDCA, or has been called the Short or Deming cycle. Ono, the guru of the Toyota production system, came along and says there's no improvement without a standard, so in essence, SDCA was created. Recently, as innovation, design thinking has become the buzzword of the day, Eric Ries created the Lean Startup, it was based on build, measure, learn. It is his idea that you develop product and get it into the hands of the customer at its most minimum level, and you leave the customer to decide the value and expand on that. I can argue that in a few instances and in my thinking and what I learned from a Toyota guru in Europe, Graham Hill, that there was similar thinking within Toyota and phrased a little different and used a little different time, but they called it explore, do, check, act. I like that a bit better, as I believe that it offers a little more substance and guidance versus just the build, measure, learn thinking. So, right or wrong, I base my lean thinking and the way I talk on these three principles: standardization, improvement, and exploration. With PDC being the glue. Without that mindset, it is difficult to traverse between the three, and I think all successful companies have a little or a mixture of the three. Some may be more innovative, Apple. Some may be more standard, Microsoft maybe. But having a place for each, even the innovation side, is what makes lean successful. Through the years, and I've probably a half dozen years now, I've been applying lean to sales and marketing. But talking to organizations, the majority of the time what we talk about and what they're looking for is one thing. And it's kind of one thing only: streamline sales. We work on the process. We're process people, right? We want to make things better, faster, cheaper. I picture the top value stream as how many lean consultants or trainers would approach the sales and marketing perspective. They would apply it on a typical project-by-project basis to marketing activities as sales or promotion, call centers, distribution, and extend the waste and cost-cutting focus of lean efforts to marketing in an attempt to make these activities more efficient. We all know the undisciplined, I should say, and creative activities that define marketing offers, a rich treasure trove of cost savings when we can make it more disciplined and structured. But what about making activities more value enhancing? And can lean really be used to grow market share or top line revenues? There's another crowd out there, kind of that lean startup type thinking, okay, that take a product development focus. They might, that design thinking style. But they might even use Lean 3P or Lean Startup or take a chapter from IDEO. Many have argued that lean is about incremental improvement and it does not allow for breakthrough thinking. I agree that SDCA and PDCA and even the continuous mindset may not deliver breakthrough by themselves. However, like most things, you start one step at a time. And I always look at the culture of innovation starts with the culture of continuous improvement. To start with breakthrough thinking is very difficult and typically not successful. And you cannot just turn it on. So starting with PDCA and a continuous improvement can be a successful way to create what I call the little I culture. Ramping it up and truly doing breakthrough innovation, that big I, is where you must engage and understand your customer markets extremely well. But to do all these things, what do we need? We need metrics, data. It is the process way of doing things. Now that we have big data, we have all the quantitative data we may ever need and want. But what about the qualitative? And who best to collect that data than our salespeople? We want pull in lean sales. But is it the operations pulling or the customer? And, where does the sales guy fit in? But this this is how I think lean is perceived by salespeople. Someone's going to come in and value stream map my process. They're going to, collect data or have me collect data for improvement. And most salespeople are just not sure who is pulling and who is pushing and the customer involvement. Sales guys only know one thing's happen. They only know what happens without him, and that's the customer. Peter Schultes appeared on stage with Dr. Deming. He later wrote the Team Handbook and the Leader Handbook, which are two books that I still reference. Not even sure when they were written. They seem to be timeless. I would assume they were in the 90s or early 90s. But I still encourage people to read them today. But Peter Schultes said, sales and marketing has never been against systemizing the process. They have always been against being systemized by the process. Well, when we think about that, he wrote that over 20 years ago, probably 25 years ago. And I think his words are still true today. To kill any engagements, simply remove any options to decide and make everything a prescription and a mandate. That eliminates any sense of control and with it, any legitimate chance for engagement. Reducing engagement is a simple matter. You simply replace the option to choose with a mandate. And, I always term that, our founding fathers referred to that as tyranny. Why not learn from sales? Why not give them a helping hand instead of trying to manipulate them? Taking it a step farther, why not learn from customers? Why not give them just a helping hand? Because what really is the intention of lean? It's what we go back to. What can sales teach us? I heard a guy say one time, ask not what sales can do for you, but ask what we can do for sales. I kind of said it that way. The bigger question is, maybe, are we listening? When we're in sales and marketing, we view things completely different. We're on the demand side. We're not on the operation side. We're trying to create demand. And I can show you just a couple different ways that we look at waste. From a viewpoint of lead generation, I could argue that we need waste. If you're familiar with the information theory, the more probable the event, the less information that is needed. Why is that true? If you receive information you expect, it contains little information, right? You're expecting it. You know what it is. For example, if you have a targeted message to one person, that information will have a better chance to succeed. If you send the same message to two people, you introduce more risk and less chance to succeed. So rather than drive failures out of a process or become more efficient, we must introduce large amounts of information and as a result, more risk. In fact, that magic number that comes from the information theory is 50%. And if you remember Wanamaker, that's exactly what he said. Operations will argue that huge amounts of muda is being caused by the unevenness of sales, the variability of demand. It's not the salespeople that cause variability. The unevenness is between supply and demand is the lack of rhythm. Think of it as a pendulum, back and forth. The idea is not to stop it, but to increase it, increase rhythm. Every effort I've seen to correct this seems to be something Dr. Deming would call tampering. If we look at our reward system, both for sales and customers, and how we budget sales efforts, that's really some of the keys in developing smoother flow. Salespeople know it is not event-driven. It is frequency and rhythm. And that goes into how you manage the overburden or Murray. Overburden for salespeople is a real problem. there needs to be a conscious effort to manage work and process. WIP. I always use Kanban, which is a method developed by Jim Benson and David Anderson in the software world to help balance and manage a salesperson's mix and volume of customers. But I'm not really here to talk about waste. I think there are bigger issues between sales and lean. Many visualize the marketing cycle through the use of funnel thinking on how it narrows down to the actual purchase of the product. A linear approach to predict, plan, and proceed. I think it's a precarious way to advance. This approach prematurely foresees a solution for the customer without ever understanding their needs. And if you consider addressing the application of social media, it does little to support that theory. As we work down the funnel, it is just as likely evidence will mount that the proposed solution is wrong. However, we have so much invested, we attempt to sway the course of action in our favor. Linear planning actually increases the risk for a customer to engage in inappropriate course of action. You know, with the people busy looking at funnels and mapping, thinking it's good, you know, they keep thinking it's going to make it more effective. But it's been said over and over again in the B2B world, 50% or 57% of the selling cycle is over by the time the salesperson gets invited. And most of us, I think, could attest that the majority of our growth and revenue is coming after the sale, not before. But our marketing dollars and direction of our sales efforts are at the top of the funnel. We talk about being adaptable or agile, but few of us really know what that means. We may talk about being customer-centric or customer-focused. But for both of those to take place, we have to develop a sales and marketing planning system that incorporates a structure that values long-term type thinking with a short-term process of regular review and assessment. That can be adjusted or changed. We must recognize that sales is not about a transactional exchange of value at a moment of time, but part of an ongoing investment in customers as appreciating assets. You know, remember the time when we sold and just hung on hoping service and support did not break us? The quality movement and lean helped change that. It may have changed it so well that now most of us make our money after the sales, not at the time of transaction. Is there a reliable system that incorporates both long-term type thinking with a short-term process of regular review? Let me give you Toyota's example. What if you were selling to them? Co-authors Leiker and Meyer of the Toyota Way Fieldbook created the pyramid of supplier partnering hierarchy of Toyota that consisted of these 7 steps. This is how you became a valued partner at Toyota. For example, we would stay in that first stage of mutual understanding and achieve a certain level of standardization, SDCA, and applying PDCA till we succeeded at it. And then they might invite us to that next step of interlocking structures. Over the years, as we developed as a partner, we became more embedded into the Toyota way. Looking deeper at Toyota's first step, that process of mutual understanding, they based this on the key elements of trust, mutual prosperity, respect for each other. Till we achieve this in our sales and marketing efforts, we will, either of us don't have little reason to proceed, our efforts should go through those PDCA stages to achieve each of the key elements as defined. In the ACT stage, we arrive at a control point to see if there are indications that Toyota is interested in initiating discussions, to go that next step. If there's no interest, well, we must continue in another cycle of gaining mutual understanding. Remember that EDCA thing I talked about? You want to take a giant step and go from mutual understanding to information sharing or something. Well, maybe that takes a little design thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, but, what do you think the risk is and the possibilities of success? How would you perceive, though, an approach to all this? Could we perceive each of these little steps in here as obstacles? This is what I go back to. It's no longer about mapping and scripting. It's about knowledge building and learning. I want to learn. I want, in essence, to be somewhat coached by my customer, or at least collaborate with them. Instead of looking at creating marketing content reaction to each of these stages, I like to think of it as a way of creating and gaining knowledge for the customer and myself. Set the target condition based on the customer's job to be done, what the customer is trying to achieve. When we think of most purchase processes, they consist of three phases. Defining a problem, identifying a solution, and selecting a supplier. There's actually like 5 people on average are involved now in most purchase decisions, or they actually have to sign off on it. Though they may have agreed on the problem, how they perceive the problem and the solution is most likely different. And with that said, deciding on a supplier may be even more clear. Well, I think most of us focus on the wrong problem, which is choosing us, the supplier, rather than aiming for that target condition or the job the customer needs done. We need to stop looking at solutions to customer problems or delighting customer experiences. They're all important, but in the longer term, maybe even a target condition, we need to see customers as valued investments in who the customer wants to become, their target condition, their job to be done. The creation of knowledge is a fundamental agile concept and an integral part of the process. In agile, you build in incremental steps, delivering to the customer frequently and gaining customer insights along the way. This way you keep the good things and discard the unwanted. Small, incremental batches of information often will facilitate in getting quicker feedback from the customer and help us determine what is of value to them. As these areas are uncovered and considered, our credibility also increases and often a stronger loyalty develops. And it's that rhythm thing and the quicker iterations. I call it the knowledge creation cycle. We implement PDCA and spirals of increasing knowledge of the system that converges on the ultimate goal, each cycle closer than the previous. I encourage you to download the Improvement Kata Handbook from the Toyota Kata website. You can start using those tools right now. But I want to warn you though, Lean Kata is not a magic potion. They are not a prescription. They set the ideal. However, you must understand your organization, the culture that exists, and the culture that your customers expect and are willing to derive value from you. Because you have to make the process your own. And I believe successful companies that start down a lean path are not lean anymore. Only the unsuccessful ones. Because if you're truly successful in implementing lean, it is simply not lean. It's yours. It becomes yours. I'm just going to go real briefly into this, is that, it seems you can't have a conversation about process or marketing without segmentation, can you? And just to simplify the process, I'll use this little format here for the segments. But the reason I want to do that is because when I add lean thinking to the concept, not a lot changes, except you can see how we can use the process to standardize, okay, in our existing formats, okay, and then how we can improve PDCA. But also, as we segment them, I like to use this because then we're only segmenting and addressing certain needs, and like we're 50% right in the corners. The important thing, though, is that for us to make a constant, we find our greatest growth opportunities on the edges along these. And we must make a concentrated effort to identify and participate in the knowledge flows along the edge. And that's where we use EDCA, which I was talking about before. And though this is how I drew it in the matrix, it's really more kind of like a puzzle that you would have, that PDCA would be in this area and EDCA would actually maybe even go into here all the way through it, and SDCA may come through here. And none of this, it depends where your customers are, but along the edges where we find our growth. And that's where we can apply the EDCA, trying to find product market fit. It's just a nice way to look at segmentation. And of course, if you believe, which I do, that you must have a profitable, well-differentiated core, most of your resources will be allocated to SDCA. That's a pattern we find in established companies. It can be used with onboarding processes, or even used effectively in the R's. Well, to be able to all our standard or our PDCA there. Okay. This is kind of what a lean startup looks like. The lean startup looks something like, it's a little bit larger, and as we find product market fit, we will standardize the product more. But I use PDCA and never jump, let's say, completely from EDCA to SDCA, because I think you have to prove the concept with PDCA in the middle of it. I also think there's a great opportunity for TWA. And again, not to be prescriptive, but is there training cards? Is there, using job instructions, job methods in the job instruction, especially in the SDCA area, or job methods when you're dealing with a much more in the personal side of things, okay? And the reason I say that, I go back to this newer funnel, as I call it, because I work with a fair amount of SaaS companies, software as a service. And my goal typically is in developing that second S, to service, to be as big as the first S, software. And TWA can be used within these onboarding processes, or even used effectively in those R's. Training with industry plays an important role in developing the SaaS process I work with. We introduce new software. Most of the time, that old functionality, we got to convert to new functionality through a trial basis. Afterwards, we create use through the human component of TWI. If you're not a software company, well, I challenge you, because most companies, when they say that, well, just about everyone is a software company these days, it seems. As I mentioned before, it's not about mapping and scripting. It's about knowledge building and learning. Salespeople return from an external world that has afforded them the opportunity to explore, converse, share ideas, and ask questions. They're often met upon the return to a restrictive internal world. And I would say don't go down that path. It has failure written all over it. It might be a prescription for cost savings, but it's not for growth. Making connections to what is known and what needs to be learned is today's sales funnel. It is just important for sales and marketing to get the message in as it is to get the message out. If you can build a culture of PDCA, a culture of learning, growth becomes part of everyone's job, actually. It is an aspect, I believe, that separates good companies, from great companies. So use Lean as your growth engine, and do something big. Jacqueline, would you like to add a few words, or?
No, if you're done, then I'll just go ahead and wrap it up if that's all you have.
Yes.
All right. Well, Joe, thank you for facilitating our session today. As mentioned previously, today's webinar is being recorded. Look for an email following our time together for a link to the recording. Feel free to share this throughout your organization. So again, thank you, Joe, and thanks to each of you for participating in today's session. Goodbye.